we're going to probably give it another minute and then let some trickle in here who are coming in. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Hope everybody enjoyed the warm day before we get into more snow.
Yeah, that's right. What's the latest prediction?
For here, like 3 to 6 is what I'm hearing. And then I'm just glad that after that I see 40s. That's what I'm glad for.
That's right.
Like, and then I think in a week after that, we might get to the 50s. So it's exciting to see that, because I'm a baseball guy, so we need it to melt so we can start the baseball season.
That's right. You've got that nice, but you don't play on that nice turf field, do you?
We might have to practice a little bit on it until we get a field, but all right. Well, I'll keep admitting those that are coming in as we get started, but I'm going to get started and want to thank you for joining us. And we're going to throw a lot of information your way. I'm here with Susan Tree, and Susan is a good friend of mine who has also helped and spoken to the seniors when I have the College Essay Academy in the summer, and I've appreciated her time there. And so I will let you introduce yourself, Susan, so you can share a little bit about yourself and what you are doing now and what you have done. So go ahead.
Oh, thank you. And thank you, everybody. I think we've got a few microphones that need to be muted there. I'm hearing dinner dishes. It's making me hungry. But thanks, Trevor, for inviting me. I've been thrilled to be part of the Delaware County Christian School community.
If you can please mute yourself, everyone. I'm going to mute all.
Oh, there we go. Okay. I started my.
Oh, sorry, I muted you. I muted you, Susan.
Hold on. There we go. I got it now. We're good? So I started my college admissions career at Bates College in Maine, which is a small liberal arts college. For those of you whose pictures I can see, anybody heard of Bates College? Anybody love oh, thank you, Marianne. Anybody love the state of Maine? 2 hands. Yeah, this was the time of year that I didn't love the state of Maine, because we had a couple of months of winter left instead of hopes of 40 and 50-degree weather. I was at Bates for 12 years. I was responsible for recruiting all over the country, reading applications, really had a fabulous foundation for my college counseling career, which after I finished my master's degree in school counseling from the University of Southern Maine, my husband and I pulled up roots and came back down to the Mid-Atlantic area. I'm a native New York City girl, so I was eager to get closer to home in Manhattan, where my folks were getting older, aren't we all? And I joined the college counseling staff at Westtown School, which is just over in Westtown Township in the southern part of Westchester. And as some of you know, it's a Quaker day and boarding school. I worked with students from all around the world, international kids, expat kids, a lot of Americans. You know, it's a little bit of everything. It was really an interesting population. I was there for a couple decades until I stepped away to care for my elderly father back up in Manhattan. And since then, I've been doing educational consulting with schools and families. I'm currently working through an organization that has tremendously just wonderful resources for folks like you called College Essay Guy. Great website, free resources. They very much align with Trevor's college counseling philosophy. There's a lot of resonance there. And when you've got a minute, take some time. It's a great resource for parents and for kids. But so happy to be here with you. My kids grew up being friends through church with a lot of Delaware County Christian kids. And so I've always felt a little bit like it's a second home.
Great. Thank you. And so we'll get started. And what I'll be doing is just, Susan and I'll be introducing each slide that I go through. And right now I'm going to start sharing my screen with you on tonight's presentation. And so I'm going to be introducing each slide. I'm going to take some time from my perspective to kind of go through what are the bullet points that I put in there. And then I'm going to ask Susan also to share her thoughts or things that she would like to regarding each of the topics that we also go through. So the goal of tonight is to hopefully take 45, 50 minutes to go through the information, and then we will have a question and answer time at the end for any of your questions. I would ask that you please not ask questions in the middle of the presentation, but to either chat them in the chat or just wait till our actual Q&A time at the end to also ask them. That'd be great. And so I will also try to keep an eye on the admitting. So if I take a brief pause to make sure I'm admitting people, that's please excuse that as well.
Do we have
So
a
let me
lot of
get started.
people in, Trevor?
Yeah, we're at 49.
Oh, great.
So we're great thank you for joining us. So let me move forward. The first topic and what we're going through tonight is some important information that is critical to what the time of admissions is at this point. And I called it as the college admissions world turns because things are changing and things are being done differently now than they were a year ago, before COVID. And now that COVID has occurred and the pandemic is happening, things are now changing differently as we speak. New things seem to come out as a week, every 2 weeks goes by. So we're going to highlight a number of those things tonight. And so follow along. A lot of information will be thrown your way, but the more you know, the more you'll be prepared. And that's what we're trying to accomplish today. So first thing I want to touch on is test optional admissions. This is kind of the big issue that has taken over college admissions since the pandemic started, and colleges started in the summer saying that they were going to be test optional for this year's seniors. And it got up to, I mean, I'm going to throw out a number. I don't know, I didn't look this up exactly, but I'm guessing 98, 97%, might be 99, are test optional this year. And what does it mean? So test optional means that a student who has taken an SAT or ACT, but they don't even have to have taken an SAT or ACT, is now given the choice by a college to submit a score to that college to be considered for admission. Where they used to say we need a score to complete your application file, now they're saying we don't, and you don't have to submit one. And you're going to let them know when you apply whether you would like to be considered test optional or not in the process. And that's what you need to choose when you apply. How many colleges? We talked about that already, but I also want to say more schools have come out in the last 2 to 3 weeks saying that we're going to be test optional next year. So I've been saying in my meetings that I feel like you could see 75 to 80% of schools still be test optional next year. You could see, I would say 55, 60% be test optional the following year. I don't know, test optional, and Susan can correct me on this as well, but probably less than 15%, 20% of schools may have been test optional before this all started. And now a lot of what we're doing moving forward is colleges are recognizing, and I'm going to move down to this point here, how has it impacted college admissions? The colleges are recognizing they can evaluate students and bring in classes, and like you will see on the next slide, it'll impact them numbers wise, where some of the more competitive schools are getting more applications because students are saying, oh, well, you know, since I don't need to submit a test score now and my grades are good and I was a little bit weaker test taker, now I can just apply and maybe have a chance to get in. So it's impacted schools in that way, and colleges, I think, like that. And I'm going to say the other thing, how long will it continue? I'm kind of bouncing around here. I could see test optional being something that colleges never turn back to requiring test scores. And yes, you're going to find your schools that say, and might be your larger flagship state schools that have way more applications that decide, okay, you know, for us to get a better picture or have another data point that we need because we don't have time to read a bunch of essays or letters of recommendation, the test score might be something they want to see again. But you'll see many schools, from the competitive admission ones down to private schools and even a number of public schools, say, we feel like we're bringing in a good class each year without needing to require test scores. So are they still important? And that's one thing I do want to emphasize is test scores are still another data point. If you are at or above the average of what they like to see, it can help you. And so don't shy away if you think you're a good test taker and you have done well on a couple tests that you've taken. It still can be a benefit, especially even for merit scholarship consideration. So Susan, I'll turn it over to you and you can share a little bit about what you think of test optional.
Well, I think it's, you know, one of the silver linings in the cloud, the COVID cloud, is that colleges really, for issues of access and equity and health and public health, were forced to give this a try. There were a few that it took forever to get it through their state legislatures if their admissions policies in a public university environment are set by state legislatures. But because of the University of California's leadership in completely going test-free, even if a high school student has tested and tested well, their scores will not be part of the University of California, from Berkeley to UCLA to San Diego. They're simply reading without scores. Now, their goal there in California is to develop some kind of equity-focused standardized test. They already have a state curriculum. So this is much more feasible in the state of California because of a highly standardized state public school curriculum. So that is not based on the core standards, interestingly. It's completely independent. So, you know, I agree, Trevor, that I think many colleges will never go back. They are having a wonderful diversification of their applicant pool this year. They are reading applications like I did, believe it or not, in the 1980s at little old Bates College in Maine when we went test optional. We were able to attract students into the applicant pool who, you know, whether they were had learning differences, or they were the first generation college in their family, or they had didn't have the funds to spend on test prep. They were bright, ready to make great use of a liberal arts curriculum. Now, interestingly, I now read applications for a very selective research university that went test optional 2 years ago. And they are heavy STEM. So this is exactly the kind of place that you would think would be holding on to standardized testing, because it is a very left brain kind of measurement assessment. And they are developing a research model for other colleges to use that can identify very specifically the access that this policy is providing to kids who have suffered a loss in this equity battle for a lot of years. So I think the burden is on the students to not think that standardized measures, whether it's a GPA or a rank or a test score, are going to get them into college. And it never has been, except perhaps at some schools that use scores as a gateway. But it's amplifying the role of the student in the application process to bring himself or herself to life.
Great. One thing when you were talking, Susan, I thought when I talked to the admission counselor in the fall, one thing she said was it's bringing also kind of full circle it's helping people understand how much we even considered test scores even when we wanted them. Test scores were kind of a first, like, oh, it's a good impression that you can make, but really most schools are still going to go deeper and want to know who you are through grades, through courses, through essays they may require, through extracurriculars. That's going to be what makes a lot of their decisions. Test scores were always something that we're showing aptitude, but also consistency with the grades. But don't think that test optional just means like it's going to be easier to get in as well. I do want to share real quick. So I've pulled up, this is collegedata.com. And so what I mean by the average score, so when you look at a college and their scores, if you see what their average is, so SAT math, they show a 7.1 average, 656 average for evidence-based reading and writing. This is the SAT, ACT at 31. You want to be at these numbers, or at least a combination, not too much below each, but a combination of what the total is of the math and the evidence-based reading and writing, or higher. If you're below, there's no sense in submitting those scores. All right, great. So let me get back to the presentation. We'll move on to slide 2 here. The next slide has to do with behind the numbers a little bit and what is making this year different as far as the numbers go. And let me say first, the numbers aren't all in yet. I mean, the regular decision numbers still have to come in come April. And what we're seeing based on the early decision and early action numbers, though, is to understand that, sorry, I'm letting somebody in here, my fault. I got too distracted. All right, is to understand that the way that things have gone the last couple years, or things, the last, I say last couple years, we've only been through COVID for now a full year almost, but it impacted last year's seniors, and now it's also impacting this year. So how are the numbers different than those in the past? I mentioned that already, that the more competitive admission schools have seen an increase in applications, and some even ones that are moderately competitive are seeing increase in numbers, because a lot of that has to do with the test optional. The other challenge, or sorry, the other issue that impacts that is that students are applying to more schools since they're not able to visit, they're not able to make those choices a little bit easier because they got to this campus and was able to take in some of what they were going to get into and what they wanted and wanted to see that. They're just throwing more applications out, kind of like throwing things to a wall and hoping they stick, maybe, so that when they can start visiting, hopefully in the spring, or they will need to start visiting. Now, as far as if they get accepted, they'll make that visit and they'll see if they can make a educated, better decision as far as where they're going. So those, in my perspective, make what those numbers are different than what they are in the past. What are specific challenges the colleges are facing in 2021? One thing they're facing is they don't know what their numbers are going to be. They are, with this pandemic, they're really trying to figure out, and they got their early numbers, and now they're going to try to figure out how many students actually applied to our school that want to come, that we can accept and we think may accept their acceptance. I don't know, that's not the word I was looking for, but how many are gonna want to attend our school, and they're making those decisions. We'll get to the demonstrated interest at the end, but colleges are really on a slippery surface right now. They are really just trying to figure out how many they need to accept to protect their yield. So I have that as the next point. What is yield? It is the amount of students that a college is, the number of applications they get, and then how many they accept, and then how many of those students that they accept are committed to come. So that number between how many they accept and then how many choose to come, they need to try to guess that number as correctly as possible when they budget for money, for financial aid, for those type of things. And so that yield, which used to be for the last 15, 20, probably more than that years, they could accurately predict that as well as possible, is going to be a lot different this year, and for a lot of schools. And so that's going to be something that's going to be interesting. And as they accept students test optional, they're also trying to figure out what the percent that we accept that applied test optional, the amount of students we accept that aren't test optional, that have submitted a score. We need to keep that even, because if we don't keep that even, it's going to show that we're more test optional, we're more wanting a test score. So there's a number of things that they're facing this year, and financial aid and scholarships. I mean, how many colleges may have lost a good amount of money, or maybe are, you know, hurting financially and having to make tough decisions, but still need to get kids. And the way they get kids is by offering merit-based aid. And that won't stop, because they're going to need to get the numbers. And so that's my perspective. But last couple things, in-person or virtual college info sessions and tours. A lot of schools are still doing the virtual thing, but they're trying to figure out when can we get students on campus again. And I know a lot of schools are also letting families come back on campus for tours, just their family, smaller tours, to be able to get that experience. And there are some that aren't, and still sticking with the virtual, which has to be hard, because how can you be competing with other schools for kids and you're not letting students on campus for tours and another one is? I mean, that's another thing they're throwing around, and that's really hard in their admission office. So what will the spring look like? Man, it's going to be, you know, they're going to do what they can to make sure they're trying to get their seniors as much as possible. And I'm hoping they let everybody on campus that wants to get on campus to look at the school. But it's going to be a competitive environment in this spring, in my perspective, at these colleges, because they're all trying to get a lot of the same kids. So Susan, go ahead and share what you think a little bit on this slide.
I think you really spoke a lot of truth there, Trevor. I think one thing I am hearing is I think colleges are going to have larger waiting lists this year because of the uncertainty of yield. And colleges are going to go out with strong financial packages and not kind of expect families to come back into a negotiation or appeal status. You know, they're going to go out with their best offer, so to speak. And those are the two things that I've been hearing talk about, is larger waiting lists. Waiting lists will move quickly and early. Kids will get off of waiting lists. Whether or not there'll be funding for them or not is another issue. We hope so. But you know, colleges have a lot of buckets to fill when they think about their admission process. You know, they have STEM, they have, you know, athletes, they have all the kids that make up a diverse composition in their student body. So they're being held very accountable for the diversification, as well as for the academic credentials of the incoming class. Admissions folks are a little fearful that the faculty will feel they are teaching a less able student population because of test optional. That has been no one's experience thus far for kids that are high academic achievers and more modest testers. No college says, oh, when we went test optional, the faculty were unhappy. It's exactly the opposite. So I think the victory this year is going to go to the kids who really, in a thoughtful and authentic way, do their best work of standing out, and to families that are applying to financially appropriate choices.
And Susan, one couple things again. I always come up with more stuff when you're talking, and they call this freshman class in college like a lost class. Like a lot of colleges budgeted on a certain number before COVID happened, and then they got less numbers than they projected. And so there's probably going to be some compensating for that over the next year, maybe two, at some colleges. They may need to accept a few more. I've been telling my students, it's helpful to be patient. If you feel like you want to commit now, some came back to me in December and like, should I commit? Unless it was early decision and they had to, I'm always saying, take a step back. I mean, colleges, you don't know yet. I don't know yet. I'm sure they may not know the position they may be in. And if you end up in that top 15, 20% of students that applied, they may come back to you in the end and say, here's a bit more merit aid. We really want you to come. We'll talk about that a little bit more in the financial aid factor, but I want to highlight that lost class factor a little bit from this past year that I heard colleges are needing to compensate for a little bit as well. Great. And I was going to ask you the patient thing. So do you feel, have you been counseling students to be patient as well?
Yeah, you know, that's a good perspective to have. What I've found over the years with teenagers is that some are happy to do that. It must be a personality factor, and it must be the way that parents kind of behave in this process of, you know, if you're on a waiting list, they must not, you know, they're devaluing you. It's like, whatever, you know, don't feel that way. This is, you know, we've all applied for jobs. We're adults. We understand there are lots of good candidates for jobs out there. And sometimes you're what they're looking for. And sometimes you lose to a better candidate and you never quite know. But some kids would never go to a college that waitlisted them. And I think that's what I'm hoping will change this year, that it won't be, those of you, if any of you are parenting seniors, that it is not devaluing an applicant at all. It just means you were probably in a pool where there were a lot of equally well qualified applicants. You weren't kind of in a rarefied group. You know, you weren't applying to be a classics major. You were in the biology kind of pool. And there are some colleges that will consider choice of academic major, and others that don't care at all about that. They don't really believe you know what you're talking about when you put down a major. But I think patience, absolutely, and letting the financial aid process work through and the merit scholarship process work through. Just make sure as parents, whether it's this year, next year, or the year after, you know kind of a little bit of what to expect. And I think you're going to be getting into that with some other financial advice here, Trevor.
Good. Great. Let's move on to the next slide, which is scholarships and financial aid. Good teaser there. Few things to note here. One, the FAFSA is going to be changing, and this is for students entering college in 23-24. I want to make sure you're aware of that. Why do I know that? Because that's when my daughter is entering college, and so I'll be the one submitting this first FAFSA that's changed.
Wow.
And so I do want to mention there's an article in the blog post that I just put up in collegecounselorcorner.com. That's a really good article with Lynn O'Shaughnessy, Mark Kantrowitz, who knows everything about financial aid, and it'll explain a number of the changes that are happening. And so I don't want to take a lot of time to dive into this, but you can see what these changes are in this article, which is really thorough. And so that's something that I would encourage you to check out. Let me get back to my presentation here. And so need-based aid versus merit aid. I just want to highlight that need-based aid, again, is from you submitting the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid. Another number of colleges, up to about 340, around that number, also require the CSS profile, which is on the College Board website. It's a College Board application. And some schools may even, on top of that, ask for your tax return. So some are pretty thorough who give out a good amount of need-based aid. And then there's merit-based aid, which in a book that I'm reading right now, which I think everyone should get, it just came out about 2 weeks ago. And I'm on chapter 5 of like 40. So don't get me wrong, I'm not like halfway or all the way done, but this is a really great book that I would recommend for anybody to read, by Ron Lieber, The Price You Pay for College. He does a great job of breaking down everything, and I'm going to get there too myself. But merit-based aid is based on your credentials, academics, grades, sometimes scores if you submit them, and one thing, and where do you place in the class of students that are applying to that school. And so you're going to get more merit-based aid, and that's actually strictly, you know, merit scholarships. If you're getting money based on those grades, there are colleges out there that will just throw a scholarship your way too. Just keep this in mind, because they do that for most students that apply, and it's supposed to get you to think like, okay, you know, I'm bringing the price down a little bit, but then you're still paying, you know, 40,000 a year, even though the school was 60. I get this for Drexel a lot. Like the sticker price is $70,000, and I'll get a student like, I got a $25,000 scholarship. That's great. I want you to get as much merit aid as you possibly can. Just know that the sticker price is still 45 a year. And so is that the price that you can pay or want to pay? And that's another thing that you will find out when it comes to merit-based aid. I mentioned this in the first slide. This is a question that a lot of parents, even counselors, have been asking. If colleges are losing money, will they offer less merit-based aid scholarships? The answer that I've heard in a number of seminars and things that I've read is no, because colleges, the merit-based aid and scholarships isn't technically money a college is getting. It's more a discount. It's more like they're not going back into now a fund that just gives them the money that they gave you for the scholarship. It's more just cutting the price of what your total cost is going to be. And so they are still going to do that a good bit, and even maybe more at some schools, to try to get the students that they want to come. And so that's why it's important to understand merit-based scholarships and what they are and those types of things. So why it's important to complete the FAFSA. Even if you think you may not qualify, I've heard of parents where they're applying to schools, some students are applying to schools that the sticker price is 65 to 70 total. And they may come back in their EFC, which is what it's called right now. It'll change in 23, 24. But the EFC right now will come back at 45 a year. Well, if you go to 100% meet need school, there's still a little of a gap there. And so it could help in that way. Also, you don't know if things may change, and then they will have your information. And some schools even ask for the FAFSA if you want to receive merit-based scholarships. Backwards, I know, but it's something that colleges will put out there that say, we require you to complete the FAFSA if you want to be considered for merit-based scholarships. A few of these last things I want to point out are things that can definitely help you understand what the total cost at a college may be. So one is a net price calculator, and I'm going to take you to an example here. This is George Washington. I'm not going to go through it, but I'm going to show you each college has to have a net price calculator on their website. Now, some may be more robust than others because some just may go with the government required one. Schools, though, if they're giving out scholarships and merit-based scholarships and need-based aid, they're going to want to make that calculator pretty accurate if a parent's going to and students going to seriously consider attending their school. So this is a tool that you can use now if you're a sophomore parent. If you're a freshman parent, now you're going to may have to project a little bit about what may be a score that my child may get, or grade point average. And it's okay to throw numbers in there and don't, try to be as accurate as possible. But good tool to use to try to see what. Don't use this as the end all though. Don't rule a school out because it comes back on the net price calculator of 25,000 and you're like, oh no way, I'm not going anywhere over 20. And you could still get that down to 20. It's just a matter of, them giving you a little bit of an idea of what scholarships you may get. And so the common data set. Common data set is a document that gives out all the information you can possibly want about a school. And you can always look up a college's common data set by just Googling. I just Googled University of Pittsburgh common data set. And this is what you'll find. And a lot of great information here. When you get to the freshman admission information, it'll give you numbers like what they're looking for as far as credits go, what subjects, what is important, very important, considered, not considered. But they'll also give you some score information, but financial information that you just keep scrolling down. Sorry for getting busy. But if you keep scrolling down, you'll run into information that has to do with scholarships and what percent do they give out in merit scholarships and things like that. So that information I also wanted to make you aware of. College Scorecard is a great website to also go to that will provide you with some great information as far as earnings and income that is having to do, basically they have to get their data only from students who've received some type of loan, government loan. So keep that in mind too. It's not every graduate, it's students who have received some type of government loan because that's how they get that information as the government. And then I already threw in here, be patient. We talked about that already. But Susan, why don't you go ahead and share a little bit of your thoughts on this slide?
The I think families, the most important thing a family can do as they're starting with a child embarking on a college search is to figure out if there are any limitations, any constraints that would be good for to have on the table. Often these are financial. This is hard because some families, my parents certainly talked about nothing financial with me. I got little hints here and there, but they were like, you get into college and we'll figure out how to pay for it. And I thought, you know, I was naive. I said, okay, college cost a lot less then, but you know, it's really important if you know, a family is thinking that flying to college is an additional expense and emotional expense that they would be very unhappy with, then make sure that's on the table as a probable limitation. You know, a student may come back and say, well, if I get a full ride to a college on the other side of the country, how about that? So you can always let them know where the flexibility is, but kids are eager to have limitations, just like when they're little. They may give you some grief about it, but they're actually glad when they have a scaffolding that reflects the values of the family. You know, you've been raising these kids with a set of values. And it's really important that those values shine through the college search and that they're explicit, that you talk about them. You know, is a Christian college really, really critical in your mind? Is that where you feel you want to spend your savings? Is a public university going to be the way you want to go? Is a geographic location in the country preferable? I talked with the family today that Ohio family student is probably going to end up at the University of Alabama. And I'm like, better weather? What's the deal here? And they said, oh no, we're retiring early to South Carolina. So we'll be halfway there. So, you know, just have those conversations as a family. And if, you know, it's hard with money because you can say, listen, here's what we're willing to spend out of pocket. The kids aren't going to understand what that means. You know, they're not. They're going to need to sit and run net price calculators with you, see what they potentially might qualify. But to say to a student, we can look at expensive private colleges if you're within the merit scholarship guidelines, if you're likely to have the price come down based on what we know about your credentials at this point, that it's going to take that. And then maybe you say, so it probably doesn't really worth investigating high-priced private colleges that give no merit scholarships. You know, $75,000 a year, $85,000 a year isn't going to be sustainable, you know, for the family. So then, you know, you start getting categories and kids understand like, oh, some colleges give merit aid, some give absolutely none. Some colleges are a lot less expensive to begin with. A lot less expensive to begin with. At some colleges, there's merit aid, but there's also a tremendous focus on need-based financial aid based on a family's ability to pay. Not what they think they should pay, but what. So my feeling is educate yourself up front and start thinking about categories of colleges. We don't want our children to feel like they're defeated before they even start. That there's so many limits, you know, it's like, okay, I'm going to Westchester, which is not a terrible option, by the way. We happen to have some pretty excellent public universities and low-cost universities not far from our homes, both in Philly and out here. But private colleges can cost the same or less than a public university because of the aid, because of the financial aid. So it's tricky. But it's a great way to begin adult conversations with your child that will bear a lot of fruit later on.
Great. And a couple things I'll mention also on top of that are, don't think that the more expensive the school is, the better it must be. That's dangerous in my perspective. And that goes with the admission rate too. I mean, I understand there are good schools that have low admission rates, but don't look at the admission rate being the telltale sign that it's a better school. Just wanted to throw those two things out there because many families, and again, you may have a different perspective not you, Susan, just in general, for those listening, and that's fine, but understand too that some will make decisions and pay more because of those two, perception or belief or whatever you want to call it, and sometimes that can be a dangerous decision, or an expensive decision.
That's right.
that you didn't have to make.
Well, and Trevor, the most important colleges on a senior's list of, when you think about, okay, here are the 3 colleges, the 7 colleges, the 20 colleges that my child is applying to. The most important colleges on that list are the ones that are likely to admit your child.
Mm-hmm.
Really, truly. You can reach as high as, any student can reach as high as they like, and they should reach for the stars. If they don't mind paying the $80 application fee to the college that, only admits 4% of the people who apply. Great. But the most important schools need to be the likely schools, and they need to be the affordable ones. You need to know upfront that they are affordable, or they're not reasonable options for your family.
Great. Thank you. Great. Let's move on to, this is an interesting one. I did really want to include this because and again, I will refer back to my blog post that I just wrote, that you will see a number of all the topics that we talk about tonight, but a number of articles under each one that I encourage you to go and look at and read. There's a great one under this one called Good Jobs in Bad Times. And I also just added one about dual enrollment, and another one that's titled The Great Divide, which I actually found in a podcast that I listened to with Mark Stucker, who worked with Susan at Westtown. But what's that podcast called now? I'm blanking on it.
College Match for You or something like that.
Yeah. I'll get it to you, those that are listening. But yeah, let's get back to, so this will be probably our quicker slide. I don't want to expound too much in this, but I do just want to make you aware of things that are being talked about today and how things may be changing a little bit. As we know, the job market changes year to year. There's jobs being created. There's jobs that get taken over by computers. I mean, there's things that happen each year that the jobs that you may be thinking of today, by the time, if you're a senior, 4 years, if you're a sophomore, 6 years down the road, may not be there, or there may be a lot of new ones. And so you just got to be flexible. You got to know what your strengths, your interests, all those things, that God-given talents, abilities that you continue to grow and improve on and be continual learner in, and you want to continue to do those things to prepare yourself. But hopefully here at DC, we'll continue to do our best to prepare you, and that's what our goal is. And then wherever you attend college is going to prepare you. But understand the job market is in flux a little bit. I mean, things change and things end, and jobs end and new jobs are created. So advanced degrees, I throw this out there because it kind of goes with dual enrollment and earning credit before. Just know undergrad, sometimes if you understand that I need to get a master's degree in something and that I'm majoring in, or a field that I'm wanting to go in, know that, does undergrad matter? Yes, it matters. But where you attend may not be the most important thing as far as where you earn that undergrad degree and that bachelor degree, because now you're going to need to go, whether it's another school, maybe you go to the same school that offers a program, that's great. But know that that advanced degree is also something you're going to have in your mind that you need to achieve as you're at the undergrad school. That's also going to cost money. And so you need to make sure that you're planning financially as well for that. Return on investment. I wrote a post in my blog a number of months ago on return on investment. What does that mean? So are you getting back and receiving the education, the experience, the skills that you need at the college that you're attending for the price that you're paying? are you getting that return on the investment? Sometimes you're like, man, I'm getting all that and I'm not paying much at all. And that's what you want. You want colleges to pay your ticket as much as they can. I'm going to use the example I use a lot when I showed a video before my financial aid presentation for years, and then they got rid of the video. I don't know where it is now. But if you're on a plane going to somewhere, everybody on that plane paid a different price.
Yeah.
Everybody in your classroom in college most likely is paying a different price. Please don't be the one on the plane or in your classroom paying the most to go to that school or learn the same things that those other kids are learning in the classroom. So our college is preparing students for today's workforce. There's another book out there that's really good called by Jeff Salingo as well. When I say as well, that's Ron's book again, my bad. I have his book as well that I want to show you once I get this off my screen. Scrolling. Okay, so he wrote this book called Who Gets In and Why. Great book. I would recommend you get this. If I'm recommending summer reading for you guys, great too. Just put these down and read them over the summer. But he wrote another book called There Is Life After College, which is also really great. And that had to do more with how the college you attend, how does that impact your career afterwards. And so I feel like, and I've attended a seminar on him about that, and it was really good as well. So I would recommend that book to anybody when it comes to return on investment. And our college is preparing you for today's workforce. That is the goal, but they're having to change some things today to make sure they are, because they have to keep up. And companies may be coming back, and this is where I'm going to mention the last couple things here. Companies are coming back saying, we need to see students, or your students, but we need to see young adults with more of these soft skills, communication ability, working in teams, collaborative. Are they asking good questions? Are they curious? These are all things that companies want to see, and colleges are having to kind of change and adjust things that they do to help students have these skills, where before they were just teach through the test, write this paper in the classroom. It was pretty standard. Now they're also offering more programs to be able to prepare students for these things. And as high schools, that's what we want to do too. And so you're going to see things here at DC probably change a little bit over time, over the next couple of years, to help prepare students in that way as well. Sorry, I'm using so dual enrollment. One thing, I could have put dual enrollment in the financial slide, but dual enrollment is a great way to save money, to prepare and get some of those credits out of the way that you would at the college to earn your bachelor's degree, some gen ed credits that you then now can take over a summer, a course, maybe two, online, to earn these college credits that you may be able to transfer. So I'm going to pull up an example of this at my alma mater, Cedarville, where they're offering they have a called College Now program, where they offer these courses that are 3 hours, and they're courses that are typical gen ed type courses at colleges. There's nursing courses, there's engineering ones, there's science ones. I took principles of biology when I was a freshman at Cedarville. Like, I probably wish I could have gotten that out of the way myself. So these are only right now, pricing, I'm not sure, it's out here somewhere. It was $175 per credit hour. At an actual college, you're probably paying $800 to $1,000 per credit hour.
Yep.
And so please save yourself money by trying to earn some college credit ahead of time. You're going to do that through AP as well. There's other ways to do that, but use dual enrollment as an opportunity to earn some college credit ahead of time. And the last thing is internships, just the experience. And we try to do this at DC with Career Week, but we're also going to try to add a couple other opportunities in. Take advantage of opportunities to work with a company supervisor, to get that hands-on experience, to get the knowledge, networking skills. All those things are important when you're thinking of how important that bachelor's degree is. So any thoughts on this slide, Susan?
No, I think it's great. I've been very impressed by the universities that are STEM focused, that are really lifting up these 21st century values of design thinking, of teamwork, of collaborative work, even in a research environment. that we used to think of research as being a very solitary and competitive field. And now it's flipping a little bit. It's flipping. A research university loves to see experiences in a student's application that have involved, teamwork and cross-disciplinary, listening and learning. That's why robotics is so great for the kids that are involved in robotics, because as we know, the robotics involves kids interested in design, technology. They have to have kinesthetic intelligence. They have to have business intelligence, and it's a model in a way for the science STEM in the future, which is a lot less solitary. And we have to remember that as our kids say, well, I have to do this group project, that has tremendous value in it. It's not, well, are they going to know what part you did? How are you going to get credit for it? The lens is, shifting on that a little bit.
Great. Juniors will know about this, and I think I made junior parents aware when I gave this presentation to juniors in career stewardship, but I did a blog post called the Gen Z X Factors, and things that I think this generation, which is going to be unique than the millennial and other previous generations, things that are important for them to have. And so when I talk about soft skills like communication skills, ability to interact with others face to face, networking, driving, just driving, community service, serving those less fortunate, work, having a job outside the home. So I encourage you to review that a little bit if you want and understand what I'm talking about there. So let's go on to the last slide, which has to do with demonstrated interest. And this is a term that has been gaining more and more popularity and, oh my God, keep off of my mouse here, more popularity and more traction over the last 5-6 years. But then as we got into COVID and the pandemic, it made it a little bit more critical to some of these colleges, because now the colleges are really wanting to have a bigger idea of whether that student may come to their school. So what is demonstrated interest? It is really just helping colleges know that you may want to go to that school, that you're curious to understand more. You're putting out there in a tour or questions that you're asking in an email, that you're wanting to participate in certain things on campus or in a program or a specific major. But what are things that they track? I mean, visits could be virtual or actual in-person visits. Other things like early decision is probably the biggest one because you're committing to attend. So that's a big one as well. Attending a visit while you're at the high school. I bring in 50 to 60 or more college visits every fall. Did they attend that? Because admission counselor is going to get more of an idea of what a student and how much they want to maybe attend their school by the amount of interest they show doing various things. There's other things that they track that you don't know of. And Susan may be able to tell you just in her experience what that those things could be, such as how many times you open an email, or did you open the emails that they send you. Those are things colleges can also track. And so you got to be just aware that colleges can know more of how interested you are in a school by little things that you maybe not even be aware of. So how can you show? I mentioned that. Why is it important now more than ever? Because kids are applying to more colleges today. And so colleges know that. And colleges know that it's not that they're all excited that they're getting 10% more applications this year, but they also know that 10% can be because many kids applied to 2 more colleges than they normally would. And so whether that student may come has to be tracked. And some of these colleges are even hiring firms outside their school to do this tracking and to give them the numbers. I talked to a school last year that came back to me when I asked the question, and they said that this information that they received back from a firm that was tracking this information would say that they're unyieldable. And that's maybe led to what the decision they got.
Wow.
And so you need to just keep in mind that, and I tell this to seniors all the time, don't sit back, apply, turn things in, think that you're done, because even when you get a defer or you're still waiting for a decision for regular decision, there's still time to be showing interest. And interest, you don't want to email every week and say like, you know, hi again, it's me. I just wanted you to know that I'm still here and I'm excited about coming. No, ask a good question. Send an update to them, you know, of something that happened that wasn't in your original application. You know, get curious about what the major is you're getting into and ask a question about a course. I mean, there's things that you can do for sure. Just the other thing, how long should I show demonstrated interest? I just mentioned that. I do this thing about drivers, passengers. The other thing that I'm going to throw out there, and this could impact financial aid, and I did read this in the Ron Lieber book last night, is understand that if you act way too excited and you're going overboard about, like, you know, which is great, if a college thinks they have you, which ED is a way for them to know that they have you because you applied ED, they may be not as excited to offer you as much merit aid. I thought that was an interesting perspective that maybe Susan, you could share on as well. But drivers and passengers, I just want to say one quick thing about that as we end this 5th slide here. Know that students and parents, but students especially, there are drivers in this college admission process and there are passengers. And I get this from Jeff Salingo's book that I just showed you. Understand that the drivers, okay, are the ones who show initiative, who ask the good questions. They're not waiting for their parents to do it for them. And they're not sitting back and saying, I'm just going to see what happens. I did the minimum. I'm not going to do this optional essay. You know, those are the passengers that just sit back and kind of wait for things to happen. The drivers kind of take a little bit of initiative, ownership of the process, show up when sometimes maybe it's going to be tough, but, you know, I may miss something that I'd like to go to, but I'm going to go to this visit because I think it's important for me to find out more information. Those are the drivers. And so you want to be a driver in the process because that may lead to more positive feedback and results that you get. So Susan, why don't you share a little bit about this last slide?
Well, and I'm busy answering questions over in the chat, Trevor. So I'm hearing you. I think the whole concept of demonstrated interest is a student doing the kind of research that is leading her through a growing affinity for that institution. And is that affinity for the institution, we call that match, we call it fit, but is the student able to engage in educational opportunities that are offered that are giving them that information and then expressing it in the application. So, when I was in admissions, I read applications from kids telling me why they wanted to major in business, and we didn't have a business undergraduate degree program. You know, that's kind of the extreme example of someone showing poor research, poor research skills. And did we discriminate against them? Well, yeah, it was a good reason to form a negative opinion about a student. Now, kids make mistakes. They misspell, the word psychology on every other application and things like that. But showing thoughtful interest over time, showing research. So some colleges have that information available when they read the student's application. They can see which webinars the students registered for and if they attended, which I think is very, very reasonable. They can see whether or not the student communicated with the admissions counselor and what that correspondence looked like. So, the webinars are becoming, the web information, virtual content is becoming much more sophisticated now and much deeper and richer than it was even a year ago when colleges were scrambling to get this out there. And they want to see kids taking advantage of it. When I was working in a school, I used to say to my students all the time, colleges like to see a warm application rather than a cold application. And the students would what? What's that mean? Well, it's very easy for them to wrap their minds around. A warm application is like a friend with an engaging, accessible personality, a curious person, someone who kind of is drawn to a friendship with you for the right reasons, very genuine reasons, as opposed to a cold application, which could be exactly the same application that was sent to 20 other colleges, maybe at the last minute. So a warm application, it's kind of like lighting a fire under it, keep it alive, keep the blood flowing, keep, once a month after you send in the application, make sure something shows up in your database of a contact you made or an advancement you took in your college search. Colleges like warm applicants. They don't like cold applicants. You're muted, Trevor.
I was replying and I ended up going on a website and forgot that I was sharing my screen there for a second. So our slides, and we want to thank you for listening and hearing and kind of taking in all the information. We are open to questions if you'd like to ask questions at this point. We have answered a lot of the questions that have been chatted in, I think, so far.
Yeah, not very well, I might say, but.
I do want to emphasize the AP question, don't colleges accept less AP scores? That AP score check, and that's what I was trying to find on, but if you Google AP score check, and I'm just going to do that real quick since we have the screen. If you Google AP score check, and it's a site in College Board. I have a link on our website as well. Sending, let's see, Board, no, this wasn't it. But it's a great site that you put in the college name and you find out now then what the college is going to want to see. Do they need a 4? And how much credit do they end up needing or giving you based on your AP score? So I just wanted to point that out. I will keep looking for that link. Actually, I'll stop sharing my screen now. So for those that are still with us, questions, anything we can ask that you, or answer that you haven't, or wondering or have on your mind?
I've been very good about not telling stories about my own children who are twins and seniors in college. So I hope Trevor understands my restraint there. But, I'm lucky that I'm not lucky that they're having their senior year in a COVID environment, but they are on campus. But parenting is different from advising other people and their children.
Does DC have a partner college that is concurrent enrollment? We do have a dual enrollment agreement with Cairn right now, where students who take RAPs, and not all because they have to have a comparable class at Cairn, but there is about 7 or 8 AP courses that we offer out of the 13 that if they take those classes and you sign up to do the dual enrollment with them, you will receive college credit. On the transcript from Cairn will be the comparable class that they offer that will be sent to colleges. The grade that will be given for them is the grade that they receive in the AP course. So that's a great partnership we have with Cairn right now for dual enrollment.
Hi guys, thank you so much for all this information. It's like a different language. My son is a sophomore. The email that you sent out, Trevor, the Templeton Merit Scholarship, is that for a particular school?
No, that's for us at DC. So that's like to get tuition, like a scholarship to attend DC. So that didn't have anything to do with.
Oh, I can ignore that.
You can.
I thought you were starting to say, oh, I'm sorry, get it.
No, you're fine.
So when do the kids start to apply for scholarships? Would it be their senior year once they've decided on the school?
Sure. There are a number of local private scholarships that may be available, and even ones if you go onto a national website like Sallie Mae or College Board, that you may find that students can apply for any year of high school. It's not as common for a scholarship to be available to students before senior year. The overwhelming majority are when they're a senior. So you have your scholarships that are offered by the college themselves, the incoming freshman scholarships, and those scholarships are the biggest ones. You're going to get chunks of money of, you know, $5,000 a year, $7,000 a year, up to even 10 to 20,000 or more. Who knows? Those are larger. The local private scholarships are still important, and money is money, and I'll take 1,000 or 2,000 here or there myself anytime. That'll help cut the cost for sure. A lot of those are one-time scholarships that really at the end you might cover, you know, 5 to 7% of the total cost. So don't, even though those are really important, I mean, I'm not going to tell a senior, you know, to ignore their grades and forget about, you know, the important things and spend all their time applying to, because some can be competitive as well. So there are different types of scholarships. Focus more on the ones that a college may offer and that you can get a larger amount of money, but also do your searching. I put in everybody's score drive in high school, I have a local scholarship, private scholarship Google Doc that I keep that gives you all the scholarships that come through my office over the years. Take a look at those and see which ones they may qualify for or be eligible for.
Do you recommend FastWeb, Trevor, or one of the other free search engines?
Yeah, FastWeb. I mean, there's Scholly. I mean, there's a number of new ones out there these days too that can benefit. Students can search for scholarships. And Susan, you may say the same thing. The phrase out there, oh, there's so much money out there that goes unspoken or that nobody ever gets. People hear that like, man, we should be applying for scholarships left and right because they're just willing to give money away. Keep in mind that sometimes the money that's out there that never got given out in a scholarship is because they didn't make it available enough. They were too specific, or, you know, they didn't fit the exact thing that they were looking for. So, you know that, you know, there is maybe scholarships out there. It's just a matter of which ones you're eligible for, you fit into, that you'll be able to apply to.
And parents always should speak with their employers about any scholarship money that may be designated for children of employees to their houses of worship, to see if we had a lot of kids getting Quaker meeting funding, you know, not tens of thousands of dollars, but every pizza that you don't have to pay for is well worth it. And if you belong to a civic organization or a fraternal organization of some kind, there's money out there through Rotary, through Jack and Jill, through those kinds of membership organizations put you at the top of the line, at the front of the line for some of their special programming.
You mentioned church. My church never really gave a scholarship, and then my dad pushed for the matching. A lot of Christian schools do a matching, and so if the church was the one to give 1,000, they would give 1,000, and now you have a $2,000 scholarship. So even you can ask your elders at your church or your leadership, like, is it possible? And you would hope a church would support the students that maybe have been coming through their church for a while.
Right.
So little things like that do matter.
Absolutely.
I have a question. So I've heard several times now that it's important to talk to admissions counselors to express interest. When I was going to college 25 years ago, we didn't correspond with admissions counselors so much. So I don't even know what that looks like. How would my child be corresponding with an admissions counselor? Is that just the admissions at pennstate.org, or, I mean, what, you know what I'm saying? How does that happen?
Great. Good question. Every college has a counselor. Now, I'm not going to say every, because the larger ones sometimes, and some of the most competitive ones may not. But overwhelming majority of schools have a counselor that is one that specifically reads your, or I'm going to say as DC, applications, because we're in the Delaware County if it's a Pennsylvania school, or we're in Pennsylvania if it's an out-of-state school. So what I've done a lot of is, like, if a senior comes in and says, you know, I have this question about a major at a school, and I'll say, great, I can find you the answer. But the best person to ask this, because you'll get your answer probably the most accurately, and now they have a little bit of a paper trail on you that you've inquired, took an initiative to ask a question, is this admission counselor. And I've emailed them the list. I've even emailed, here's all the counselors if you can't find them of the schools you applied to. I'm happy to help them with that, but there's always that one person at the college that will be the one reading their application, and that's the one they should connect with. So basically what I want to emphasize is, to be a driver in the process is the student does the communicating. The student is the one that asks if there's a question that they are curious to know about the school, or whether they have something, or is there going to be am I able to tour, you know, on this day. It is good for the student to reach out. If there's a financial question that you're saying as a parent, like, I need to know if this is really what it costs, or, you know, the student can still ask that. Great. I'm not saying parents have to totally stay out of the process, but the student needs to be the one that takes the initiative to ask those questions and inquire to schools. And when they're missing documents, not have the parent be the one that, like, oh, what are you missing? Why are you missing? We sent that. No, the student should be the one that does that. Susan, would you say anything differently?
You know, I think that kids should have legitimate questions to ask admissions counselors. They should. I mean, you and I would if we were, you know, applying for a job. And granted, we have a level of confidence and sophistication about a research process. But, you know, when I'm buying a new refrigerator, terrible blow to my savings account for those of us who have recently had to replace a refrigerator, you better believe I did my research. I read Consumer Report. I looked at specs all over the place. I still didn't know a lot about mechanical engineering, but I knew what questions I needed to have answered in order to advance my interest in a particular product. And so you know, that's what I asked. And I had to go to the person who was responsible for that product. And so, for example, when I was in admissions at Bates quite a few years ago, here I am at a liberal arts college in Maine. I was the admissions counselor for Metro New York, for the entire state of Connecticut. Oh my gosh, and then you always have some odd tertiary territories. So I had to design the recruitment process for those territories. And then I had to be the point person for the school counselors, as well as for students who had questions. So you know, if you look at a website, you know, if you go to the Haverford College website or the Beloit College website, or, you know, the University of, you know, Nebraska, on the admissions page, it'll break down where applicants come from and who's the friendly looking, you know, 20 or 30 something year old who has responsibility for that territory. Now, how much of an answer you get often depends on how you broach the question. And what I always say to kids is, first introduce yourself. You know, I think the first half of any kind of question is letting the person know who you are and what you already know. So, who I am, you know, I'm a, you know, rising junior or rising senior at Delaware County Community College. I understand you are the admissions counselor for students from my territory. I look forward to meeting you at some time in the future. Maybe you'll have a chance to visit my wonderful high school. We happen to have a very strong fill in the blank department. I am interested in studying, you know, biochemistry at the university. I was looking on the website and I have found I'm making this up, by the way, as I go along. I have found some professors who are doing some really interesting research in cell fusion, and is it appropriate for me to contact them directly and ask some questions, or sit in on a virtual class? You know, or it might be something like I'm a tenor in an a cappella choir. Who can I speak with about the rigor of the audition process and whether or not, you know, I'm a good match for blah, blah, blah. So it can be very deeply personal. It shouldn't be a question that you can get by Googling it really easily on the website. Like, do you have a biology major? Do you have a pre-med program? They're going to want to knock it up a notch. And it should be a question about something in your life as a teenager and how you are trying to determine if this college is going to deliver the program and the environment that you really want. You may not know a whole lot. I didn't when I was applying to college, but kids are so much more sophisticated now. And figuring out research is something they do every day of the school year. So it can be pretty, is that helpful? I mean, in terms of just, the kids can introduce themselves and then ask for some help in finding out what they want to know more about.
Yes. So you're saying that for most colleges, we can go on the website and in the admissions section, there should be a page that gives the counselors for each geographic area and their email addresses.
Yes.
Yes.
And if you can't find that, let me know, and I'll find that information for you. The other thing about demonstrated interest is, like last week, we had a student decision come back from a school. It surprised me because I thought this student was well overqualified for the school. The feedback I got back was, oh, we're competitive and we had more mission numbers. You get that, speak of like, okay, here's what every college tells me why it was so hard to make a decision. But the one line that caught me was, we also, 95% of students who applied did the optional interview. This student did not do the optional interview.
Interesting.
All of a sudden, I was like, there you go. That's probably might be your answer.
And that's a real no-brainer, Trevor. I mean, to you and me. To some kids, they first of all, they see the word optional and they really think it's optional, which is, I think it's probably a mistake. Some kids feel they won't be well served by having an interview because they're shy.
Mm-hmm.
And to that I say, shy teenagers interview just as well. In fact, often better than extremely extroverted teenagers. Because interviewing is all about, getting to know each other and showing up. It's half of success is starting.
Yeah, and also I will say, and I'll end with this with demonstrated interest. It's junior year is not a big year to start like having to make all this communication. Over the summer before senior year, when you're starting to write essays and you're starting to do more research on where, and you're starting to fill out the application, that's usually when counselors are starting to really want to communicate with students. Not saying junior year can't happen, but that fall of senior year is a big year of communication in my perspective. Great. Any other questions?
Yes. When it comes to like juniors, I was wondering about the College Board and any like SAT updates. Are the updates that apply to the seniors basically similar to the ones that apply to us juniors?
So are you, Latu, talking about the like subject tests have gone away and the essay portion's gone away, that type of thing?
Yeah, in general, like College Board, like news and such things that apply to like college administrations.
If they make announcements like that, those are permanent. Those
Okay.
are affecting you too. Those aren't just like temporary, we're only going to do this during the pandemic or something, or we're going to make it. Those are definitely permanent. So yes, College Board, things are changing in the testing world, and they've eliminated that essay portion and the subject test, which is leading to hopefully the ACT getting rid of their writing section, and testing is changing as we speak. So stay tuned, because you may hear more decisions coming up the road, but yes, those are permanent that are affecting you too. Good point, Susan, about students boycotting standardized tests, putting their energy elsewhere. I like that. Well,
I think that's a hard subject to answer in one sentence. My answer is very inadequate. But I think if a student says, I'm really busy, even in this COVID environment, I'm working really hard to develop certain projects and doing some virtual research with this opportunity that I had, and why would I need to take my attention away from these really important and growthful experiences to practice for standardized tests. Some families aren't going to be happy unless their kids do their absolute best on standardized tests. They view it as close no door before it's time. They want to keep all their options open, and I totally respect that. And other families are just saying, are we okay with laying this down and saying you're going to develop your interests and your skill set in different ways. We're going to make sure those shine through the application process. And we're going to make sure that the colleges you apply to have an optional, test optional, or a test free process. A lot of kids on the West Coast are doing this because of what the University of California and Cal State are doing by going test free. They're basically punching the test prep industry in the gut with that. Whether or not that's going to go elsewhere, I don't know. I still see a lot of kids prepping. I think, a lot of kids want to give standardized tests a try to see if it's going to be a standout area for them. And, that's great too. That's great too. I think those of you who are saying, wow, I don't know what I think, where Mr. Creedon's office is. Walk on in and have that conversation.
Great. Any other
Hey,
questions?
Trevor, it's Charles.
Yeah.
Yeah, Charles here, Liam's dad. I just wanted to confirm if I heard you correctly, and let me pause and say thanks to you and Susan for hosting this webinar tonight. It's been very valuable for us, so thank you.
Sure.
But the question I wanted to confirm, if I heard correctly, was those seniors such as our son that are awaiting standard application responses or normal application, did I believe that some of those decisions back from the schools where they've applied may be a little later than previous years?
I've not heard of schools now. I don't, as far as when regular decisions come back, that typically is in the month of March.
Okay.
And could go all the way up to April 1st. A lot of them stop at April 1st. They're not going to do much later than that at all. But I haven't heard of schools saying we're going to have decisions later. I still think if regular decision, a lot of times they'll put it on their website when they expect to get decisions back. Some will just give you a range that'll say between March 1st and March 15th, or March we'll get our decision back to you. It really differs. But up till that point, I wouldn't hesitate to still market yourself, have Liam market himself, which he's been doing, I think. But make sure they know that he could see himself there if he gets accepted, and make that apparent.
So my quick follow-up to that is what I heard in the last 4 or 5 minutes from Susan and you agreeing is when a school indicates that they're interview optional, you shouldn't pass on that opportunity. You just seize it 100% of the time, correct?
That's my advice. But Susan, maybe you can say something different.
Yeah, I would be curious to hear a student talk about why they would avoid the interview. What happens is some kids don't get an interview because they miss the deadline for requesting it. That's my experience with students that I'm working with, is that they didn't kind of go college to college and on their spreadsheet or however they're keeping notebook, however they keep track of information, they didn't kind of make a note of how to request an interview and when it had to be done by. There are some colleges that automatically assign an interview to pretty much every applicant. And those tend to be the Ivies for the most part. This year it's a little bit different because of the environment we're in. But Duke, Stanford, Georgetown, they pretty much try and follow up with every applicant with an alumni interview, unless they overflow, right? So as soon as part one or whatever the first part of the application is that lands, that it goes right into that request system. sometimes parents get all excited saying, oh my gosh, Georgetown wants to interview my son. Is this a good sign? And I'm like, you know, everybody gets one. I don't want to burst your bubble, but go for it. Now it's in his control to have a great interview with, you know, whether it's a young alum or an older alum. But other colleges, the vast majority of them that even have interviews, the student has to make a request. Usually on the website, there's a form or a mechanism whereby a certain date, they simply have to put that in. They do not have to they don't have to have an application in the system yet. They can, if they get that application in early, but it could go in from a non-applicant. And a third group of colleges, there are probably more than 3, a third group, when you apply, you are always given, the student is always given access to what they call their online application account. And there's a portal, username, password, they use to enter into that online application account. And sometimes that's where they request the alumni interview. I'm thinking of Tufts does it that way. There are a couple colleges this year, like the University of Chicago, that instead of alumni interviews are inviting kids to submit an optional, I think it's a 2-minute video. And it's kind of a free-for-all. It's a wild card. And I think all they say is, pretend you're interviewing with a, you know, an imaginary person here and tell us what you'd like us to know that we might not be gleaning from other parts of your application. So some kids are getting creative, some are playing it very straight, some are being academic. I don't think the success of the application rises and falls on these interviews, but again, it's a dimension. It provides dimension, and that's kind of a new buzz phrase that I'm hearing a lot, is colleges want to see dimension, especially in the absence of test scores.
Great.
And do you regularly, Trevor, you know, try to emphasize to seniors the importance of seizing those opportunities for interviews?
Well, I always tell them anything that's optional is not optional. I tell them
Good.
that all the time. And
Maybe you
honestly,
can
it's
tell
hard.
myself that again.
Okay. But it's hard for me to also start telling them, like, you need to do this, because all colleges are going to be different and they're going to ask for certain things. So
Right.
I tell them to make sure when they go through each of the things that the college is asking for, that anything is optional is not optional, and you need to make sure you're doing those things that show initiative and go above and beyond. And because you don't want them to ever come back and say, well, you know, they were borderline and these couple students did this and this one didn't. You don't want that to happen. And that's what I'm making sure they understand.
Last question. Assuming, like our son, he put his applications in by the end of September,
Woo.
is it too late to go back and request an interview now?
Never too late to request. I mean, let's see what they say.
Well,
He's showing in, go ahead.
The forms may no longer be live on the websites. If it's one of those colleges where you have to just fill out a web form and submit it, a lot of those are down now. But yeah, don't ever give up without checking it out.
I'll be honest with you, Charles. Colleges are virtual, a lot of them, and these admission officers are also virtual. They're looking to meet with people. I mean, they're not in the office. And so take it, I mean, even if he says, can I meet with you, over Zoom quickly and talk about, if there's not an opportunity online to sign up, do it. It's that a little bit of initiative that may help. You don't know. So that's just a thought I had.
Well, I had a gal this year who was early decision at I think it was William and Mary, and she missed the early decision interview request deadline. And I said, okay, so email your admissions counselor and say, I'm so sorry that I missed the early decision. I just decided to apply early decision, and here's why. I'm so excited. It's my first choice. I'm going to enroll if you admit me. I really would like to talk through with someone a couple of impressions I have and kind of use someone as a sounding board so I said, don't use the word interview, but say sounding board, say a reflective conversation, a courageous conversation. And the admissions guy was like, yeah, when do you want to meet? How about Friday at 4? Here's my blah, blah, blah. And they forged such a helpful, and she didn't do it just to attract attention. She had some really good things she wanted to talk about, and she felt they were added in a very important dimension to her application. And it was a wonderful experience for her to seize the bull by the horns and go for it. And I think the admissions guy, when he read her application, he knew her a lot better. And some of that was just luck that he was interested. And some of it was that she showed, you know, real passion for getting answers to some of these questions she had.
Great. I'm going to be sensitive
Thank you,
to your
Beth.
time. It's 8:30. So if you have any other questions, feel free to email me at tcreedon@dccs.org. I'll make sure to get back to you quickly. If you have a question for Susan, I'm happy to share her email address with you. I won't stick it here now, but thank you for attending. I appreciate your time. Have a great night. Susan, thank you for your time as well.
My pleasure.
And look forward to working with you more in the future. Take care.
Bye, everybody. Thanks for having me.
Bye.